Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Philly cheesesteak dip. That's right, Philadelphia is going to the Super Bowl. And in honor of that, we're going to do their famous sandwich in dip form, which to be honest is not that easy for me, since as a Giants fan, I really dislike the Eagles. But having said that, I dislike the Patriots much more, so I guess it's fine. But anyway, I should stop hating and move on to the grading. But before we get to the cheese, we got to prep our steak. And I'm going to begin with a couple pieces of top sirloin with a total weight of about a pound. And what I'll do is take a knife and make some nice thick slices as shown. And while there are many different ways we could prep the steak for this, what my game plan is to slice these into thick pieces, season it generously with salt and pepper, and then sear these to a nice medium, after which once cooled we'll chop this up into small pieces. And yes, it would be a little easier just to cook these steaks as is, and then chop them up. But by slicing these and creating all that extra surface area, we are going to get significantly more browning, which equals more flavor. We also, of course, could just chop it all up now, and then sear it already all cut up. But I was afraid of losing too much moisture that way, which is why I decided on this approach. And if you happen to check out the blog post, I'm going to give you even more options. But anyway, like I said, I'm going to slice this up and season it very generously on both sides with salt and freshly ground black pepper. At which point we'll head to the stove and sear these in a very hot pan set over high heat, into which I drizzle a little bit of oil. And yes, I did wait to see those first few wisps of smoke so that I knew my pan was hot enough, because we do want to try to get some nice browning here. And we don't want this meat just sort of boiling in its own juices, which is what happens if you don't use a hot enough pan. But anyway, on high heat, I'm going to give that first side about 3 minutes or so. And I'm sort of watching that doneness creep up the sides. And when it looked a little something like this, I went ahead and flipped those over. And then because the pan is so hot, what I'll do once those are flipped is reduce the heat to medium and let these go for another 3 or 4 minutes or until I think they're about medium. And one visual clue is that juice coming to the top. When it looks like that, we're probably close. And obviously those small pieces are going to finish first. So we'll go ahead and take the biggest pieces out last. And we'll simply transfer those into a bowl to cool. At which point, like I said, we'll go ahead and chop it up. So our meat is looking very nice, and we will finish prepping that later. But right now we have to get back to our pan, which as you can see now features a world-class fond that we are totally going to take advantage of by adding 1 diced onion, as well as a nice big pinch of salt and decent-sized chunk of butter. And we'll go ahead and cook these onions on medium until they just start to soften up. And by the way, if you're new around here and don't know what a fond is, that's just a fancy culinary term for all those meat juices that brown to the bottom of the pan. And what's going to happen is the moisture from those onions is going to dissolve all that goodness, which is referred to as deglazing. So we're basically cleaning the pan at the same time we're adding a lot of extra flavor. And that reminds me of an old saying I just made up. Good cooks do easy dishes. Okay, so by using the proper technique, not only do we get a better product, we're not having to spend 20 minutes later scrubbing a pan. But anyway, we'll go ahead and cook those onions until they just start to soften up, at which point we can go ahead and throw in our diced peppers. And for that, I'm going to be using an array of fresh and pickled peppers. So what I have here is a green and red bell pepper, as well as some jalapeno. And then I'll also do 2 kinds of pickled pepper. These red ones are called peppadews, and these sliced up yellow-greenish ones are pepperoncini. And by the way, I'm not using all of this. We're only going to need about 1.5 cups to 2 cups once diced, which we will add to our onion mixture and continue cooking, stirring on medium. And like the onions, I'm going to cook these until they just start to soften up. Okay, we don't really want these soft and mushy, but we do want to take that raw edge off. So we will cook those for a couple minutes, at which point we will simply turn off the heat and set those aside while we move on to chop our meat up, which by now should be fully cooled. And what I'll do is take one of these pieces and cut it into thin strips, and then turn it and cut it across into however small pieces I want. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm using about a pound of steak here, but please feel free to adjust that meat to cheese ratio. All right, do we want a cheesy dip with some steak in it? Or do we want more of a meaty dip with cheese in it? So adjust that meat amount if you see fit. I mean, you are, after all, the Nick Foles of your dip goals. And then what we'll do once that's all chopped nice and small is add it back to the bowl along with all those accumulated juices. And then we can also go ahead and transfer in our onion and pepper mixture. At which point we're ready for our cheese. Or should I say cheeses, since we're using 2 kinds. The first of which would be a pound of cream cheese, which ideally is room temp and very soft. And this one was sort of like that. And then we're also going to do a half pound of provolone, or as it's pronounced in Italy, a provolone. And we will go ahead and grate that in. And of course, it's never a bad idea to save a little of that for the top. And then once our cheeses are set, we'll finish this up with a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, which I'll add for extra savoriness. Plus, I really do enjoy trying to say Worcestershire sauce. And then last but not least, we will do a shake of cayenne. And then once all that's in there, we'll grab a spoon and give this a mix. And I should mention, if you want this to be way more difficult than it should be, you'll want to use cream cheese that's not fully softened yet, and use a too small bowl. And since I had both of those things going for me, this took like 5 minutes before it started to smear together. But eventually it did. And once that has been thoroughly mixed, it's ready to transfer into our baking dish. And we could, if we want, put it all in one regular-sized casserole dish. But since this, in my opinion, is better hot, I'm actually just going to cook half at a time in a smaller casserole dish. And that way, once the first batch is done, we'll go ahead and cook off the second one and have it nice and hot and fresh for the second half of the party. But either way, we'll go ahead and transfer that in. At which point I'm going to switch to a fork to kind of press it down and smooth out the top. And then once all that's said, I do recommend transferring this onto a sheet pan, since we could have some bubble over. Better safe than sorry you're cleaning the bottom of the oven. And then if we did save some of that provolone, which you really should have, we'll sprinkle that over the top. And that's it. Our Philly cheesesteak dip is ready for the oven. So let's go ahead and transfer that into the center of a 400-degree oven for about 20-25 minutes, plus maybe a minute or two under the broiler, or until it's heated through, bubbling and beautifully browned, and ideally looking something very similar to this. Man, that looks good. I hope Pat and Gino are watching. But anyway, what I like to do is let that cool for a couple minutes before serving it up next to some sliced bread. And I wasn't sure whether to use a spoon or a knife to serve this, so I placed down both. And I decided to try out the spoon first, so I grabbed it and went in for a taste. And I have to say, as I was loading up that first slice of bread, I was thinking this stuff does not look that great. This better taste awesome, and something pretty close to a Philly cheesesteak, which I am very happy to report it did. It pretty much tastes exactly like the inside of an extra cheesy Philly cheesesteak. The provolone kind, by the way, and not that Cheez Whiz version, which is neither cheese nor whiz. But anyway, I was absolutely thrilled with how this came out. And I probably should have stopped right there, but I decided to make sure that the knife would work, which it did. And yes, I fully admit to be breaking my own rule, which is to call something a dip, you have to be able to dip into it, and not have to use a spoon or knife, which would make it a spread, not a dip. I mean, I think I could have dipped the bread right in, but I just chose not to. But anyway, that's it. What I am in fact calling a Philly cheesesteak dip. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go start working on a New England clam chowder dip to honor the Patriots. Just kidding. Or am I? Anyway, stay tuned. But in the meantime, I really do hope you give this delicious dip a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.